Right, so now we've completed looking at controlling a stage and managing product delivery. Remember, very simple. Assign work to be done. Monitor the stage, handle risks as they come along and that you've planned for, and deal with any issues. Remember, we need to manage risks, respond to issues differently. Okay, have plans for risks, but we don't for issues. Escalate where we need to if we can't handle it, it's not within our remit, manage by exception, tolerances and empowerment and all that. Get ad hoc advice or support from the board where necessary in directing a project. And keep tracking through stages one after the other. Every stage we need to have governance sign off that we want to go to the next stage. Really, this is where the directing a project comes. This is what the board are there for. Provide that direction and decision making, whether you go on to the next stage or not, and continue with the project. Do they still want it? So they've still got involvement all the way through the project, really. How much just depends on how much you agree and you believe they need. And this is really where the project manager steps in quite a bit. So they go to that and request the next stage. Now, when we get to the final stage, right, something slightly different. Firstly, like we said earlier, we don't have a stage boundary because we don't have a boundary between two stages. Now we have closing a project process. So let's have a look at that now. So closing a project process. This is to mark the end of the project. Remember, projects do have a finish. They're supposed to have a finish. How do we know otherwise? Right? Start and a finish. That's why they're temporary. It's one of the characteristics, remember. So we mark the end. Now it is in the stage itself. So I'll put a boundary down here to say this is the stage. So this will be stage 2 onwards. So we'll have stage 2 to the end. So here we have the final stage. And we go through the same delivery process, controlling stage and managing product delivery, assuming that's what we've got in there. But in the end of the day, we've still got something to do, even if we're not building anything. We're maybe bolting everything together and doing final testing, final piloting or reviews of what we're doing here. It all depends on what you've decided that the project needs. Remember, this is the whole point. You need to tailor all these methods, PRINCE2 or whatever, to fit what the project needs when it needs it through the project, right? So you can be a mixed match of all sorts of techniques and approaches as you go through. So it doesn't really matter. Just making sure that you understand what the project will need to do it. Right? And don't be afraid to change things. If you need to change things, just make sure that anything changes, everybody understands that. But far more important, that somebody who has the authority signs that change off. Right? This is crucial. Somebody needs to authorize the change. Right? And that's what happens. Okay. There's a very famous film out called the Pentagon Wars. Started out making an army personnel carrier. Right? About 20 years later, they end up with a tank. And that's because there was no authorized change on what they were doing within the project or the program, depending on it. Very interesting program, actually. It's a real life project, actually, used for very well for training. So, final stage. And what happens when we approach the end of the final stage, we're now at a point where we're going to shut the stage down. So we're looking at normal closure. So the first thing we're going to do now is hand over the products. So we need to hand over products and get final authorization. So we hand over our products, right? Products, whatever it happens to be. And we get a final sign off that they're being closed. That will trigger. And once they've been accepted, right, by acceptance criteria, then we are ready to close the project down. Then we need to start updating all our documents. So at this point, we need to update all project documents, all project documents. All those in the PID, the project initiation documentation primarily, right? That's the first thing we need to do, is update all the documents, which we know. Business case. We then get the stage plan, of course, for this particular stage plan, which will then update the full project plan, right? We need the updating because what the business need to do is to review those to agree that they're ready to shut the project down as well. They believe everything's been fixed and been delivered. So we need to make sure our register up to date, registers, our configuration item records. So configuration item records, CIRs, we also need to make sure that the communications plan is up to date in particular. So we need to make sure our communication strategy is up to date, because now we're going to be using that to advise everybody that the project's strategy, beg your pardon, make sure the project now, they know that the project is now actually closed. Okay. And the other thing you need to do is to produce an end project report and advise the business that we've now closed. We're now ready to close. But the PM doesn't close the project. The board closed the project based on all that information. Okay. So we get to that point where that's what we're going to do. And then what the project manager needs to do is to draft up a project closure notification. In other words, really a document that the board are going to sign off, and the PM will end up doing probably the work actually, to send off to everybody, all stakeholders, that the project's closed. That's why you need the configuration management strategy completed at this point, because obviously that has all the numbers and contacts of anybody who's been involved that needs to know at this point in time, right? And then they'll go to requests. We ought to do it at the top actually. Requests from here, request close the project. Close project. And there's one other thing they're going to be saying up here too. And this is the benefits review plan. So what they're going to also draft now is the benefits review plan. And this is why this particular document was never part of the project initiation documentation, because that PID, the project initiation documentation, is now going to be wrapped up and filed away when the project's closed, because it's only for the project, you know, in case audit, people want to check everything, lessons learned and stuff, which we'll look at on there in a moment. So all that's part of the project. Okay, so that all gets filed away. But the benefits review plan, of course, now is really going to take a hold. It may have some sort of realization through the project to make sure that it's delivering, or indicative of what it might deliver at the end of the project. But sometimes we don't always get that until we've actually completed it. But this is where things are changing, right? You need to really do that as you go through the project if you can do. Deliver bits and see how it's going to work for you. This is usually a good idea. So at the end of each particular end of its stage at a boundary, if you've got some products and you can deploy them, this is usually a good idea to do, and we probably do that. Right. So the benefits review plan also goes up here. So I'm going to put the BRP, we're going to put the project initiation documentation that we've all closed off as well, and the draft notification for closure. Let's put that. The closure notification document that goes up there too, to show that now we've closed everything off. We need to send it off. So that'll be contact numbers and everything for the board to use to send off onto their stakeholders. So this is the standard thing. Closing, wrap all the documentation up, get the draft project closure notification written up, get the benefits review plan, tidy all the rest of the documentation up, including the end project report, and then go to the board and request close the project. In which case they'll authorize close the project. Hopefully they will then authorize close project. And they will then obviously at this point notify corporate and program that the project has now closed down. And then we signed off all the documentation and worked. Now, that's all well and good when things run normally. Like here, when things run normally within a stage, we can get to the stage boundary and shut it off. Now, sometimes that doesn't always happen. Sometimes there comes an authority halfway through the project, we're closing the project down. Or at this particular point, it's gone beyond the bounds of comfort zones, things have happened, issues have occurred, and we can't recover from those issues. Like here, it might be that the exception plan will be to shut the project down for whatever reason, right? At some point, there will be a request for a premature closure. So I'm going to put a big red line here and say premature closure. Now, close. So now we're automatically at closing a project. So I'm going to write some stuff up in red. This represents the different documents and approaches and activities we need to have from a premature closure point of view. Now, think about this. I'm halfway through a project. I've got things that have been built. Some stuff is still in the middle of being built, and some stuff I haven't even started yet. So one of the first things we need to do is advise that, but we need to document why we've got the problem. So we need to add an issue, right, to the register. So don't forget to do that. This is important. Add an issue why we're closing. This is an issue, obviously. Come out the blue, shut in the project. You need to add that in. Why are we doing this? Right. Then after that, we've got some products. So we need to produce a product status account. Right. Interestingly enough, all the other ones we do, all the reports we do out of our registers and stuff, they're all one-off reports. So you produce a report, it's one-off for a particular issue, a particular configuration, a particular risk, for example. Here it's a bit different. Here is an account of anything I've done so far. So you're producing a report on a lot more than more items, right? So the product status account, we're looking at all the different configuration about what I've got so far that I've completed, what I'm in the middle of building, and what I've got yet to do. Because there's some things you might have to complete or other actions. So that'll lead to, other recommended actions. So we need to have now recommended actions. Recommended actions from here. For example, if you've got something in the middle of being done, you've got to decide what I'm going to do with what I've got being done. Do I complete them or not? Stuff that's done already, what do I do with that? Do I store it for the possibility of use for a later date, or can I just scrap it, for example? For instance, if you're putting a building up and suddenly you run out of money to put the building up, you've got to do something with that building because it might just be a shell. So I've got to put tarpaulins over it, hope it's not that big. You've got to seal it off from the weather. You've got to make sure the surfaces are cut off so there's no power and water going through it. You've got to make sure it's protected from and protecting the general public. So all these things have to take place when you've got a building that's suddenly halted in the middle of being built. We see these things quite often, actually. So this is what you run the PSA for, to find out where are we with stuff, and then follow on recommended further actions, what I need to do. Is there some stuff I can take and complete within operations? I can deliver what I've got so far. We can take the rest of operations and do that. Right? And then we go through the rest of the cycle, and then we go back up to the top, and we go through the rest of the cycle, update all the documents, the business case, literally explain where we are and what's happened with the project. Do an end project report. We need to do that. But remember, do make sure you document it from an issue. And then we go through the rest of it to then go and authorize or get requests to authorize close the project from the board at this point. Right. So that premature will close from anywhere. So that will link down to all this stuff here to do these, but you still have to go back and complete the rest of the documentation anyway, close it all off. Right. So just bear that in mind. But don't forget the issue thing, because you want to make sure you understood why you did that. But this is how we close the project down. Right? Either normally we get to the end, delivered everything, or we've come to a premature closure, make sure we get everything updated and go up to the board. But at the end of the day, it's the board that authorised the closure. The board do that, and then they'll notify corporate and program that that particular project shut down. So this is PRINCE2 in a high-level view. We've gone to detail in some things because some of those things are useful to understand and give you some indication of the documentation you might need to use. And again, it's what you might need or what you've got running for you, right? So just bear that in mind, and hopefully that's giving you a good indication, a good understanding of the framework. Very straightforward, like all projects. You've got to start off at a high-level view of what it is and starting up, put the detail into the planning, what is relevance for the planning in initiating the project, get that signed off as well, and then run the plan and go through it. So it's doing everything in detail, a piece at a time, getting the level of detail a piece at a time to make sure we've got the governance in place to keep the fact that we're only going when we need to go and when they authorise us to go to the next part of the project and hopefully get to the end. Because at the end of the day, it's their project. It's the project executive's project. That role is accountable for the project success. Nobody else. That role is, right? All we're doing, everybody else is doing, is managing the environment and keeping all the products going through to help provide the solution for the project executive who's leading there, running it on behalf of the senior user who's at the end of the day going to use the product, right? Or their client's going to use the product, and keeping a track on the supplier who's building it for you. And that's what the whole system's about.